Welcome, Michael at Wickerson Studios, moving right along with Book 2, Chapter 3, looking at speeding along with lists and tuples and sets. Now, I'm going to leave tuples and sets till the end before we go into Chapter 4, which will be on dictionaries, which is exciting because after that, we jump hard into functions, classes, errors, and then get on to some tougher data. So getting into modules, which is going to be amazing. Now, one thing I've noticed with Python, ghPython, and working in Grasshopper is you don't have to busy yourself writing in the Python scripts a bunch of Rhino script syntax. It's not where I think I want to go. It's not what's important. What I want to be able to do is drive very simple numeric parameters with Python. So I can still stay with all the geometry and the fancy footwork of modeling the way I always was used to in node scripting and Grasshopper, but you can really amp up your game with what you're doing to those numbers before you get into it. So just like the other script we did before, I'm going to produce a little bit of a sandbox down here and call that the sandbox. And I may do a little bit of work in there as we go. Let me open it up and just get rid of what the source of where I'm getting all this information from, sandbox. And then we'll pull some files in and see if we can do any acrobatics. I don't think I'll have time in this video, but I'll do a video with the sandbox following this, and then I'll go into tuples or tuples and sets and then do a whole other page on dictionaries. Starting out, there's a little bit of information jumping in there. Keep in mind that I'm doing the same thing right along with my Jupyter notebooks from start to end, which will be in the application that I will have on GitHub. And I also have broken everything in each chapter. If you take a look here in Chapter 2, Book 2, Chapter 3, you've got lists, which I basically packed everything into. Now, it's a pretty ugly script. If you take a look over here on the side, you can see that that's it's pretty full of stuff that you don't really need, but it's just getting it all up and running and catching every error that I'm experiencing in Grasshopper because I'm working in Python 2 as opposed to Python 3 that works on here. So certain methods like copy, I think reverse sort or something else doesn't work. And it will work in here, and certainly the formatting works better with the F strings in Python 3, so that's working here and in Jupyter Notebooks. But what I've done in Grasshopper is whenever I have problems with anything, I put it in the red. So when we get to this mod, when we end up trying to use the clear method, it's not working in Python 2.0, and I'm not bothering trying to fix it by learning how to do Python 2.0. I'm not going to go back into that. I don't have a job asking me to do that. So I'm just going to let it lie until I need to use it. So even though I've got the formatting strings in here that would work in Python 3 on Jupyter Notebooks or on Visual Studio Code, and you can get access to all of this on GitHub. Basically, those are the ones, and the last one was copies not working for me in that way. There's other ways to copy things, but the ones that are the highlights, I leave them here for the end, and then all of the samples are here running. So if you're looking at list contains, obviously I don't need the A. I've not put any parameters on. You're just finding out if a list contains something or not. The script is basically written into this section so you can see it large, but if you want to go in and experience what it looks like in the Python, it's up and running here. Whenever you are cutting and pasting things and selecting, make sure you cut and then paste back in. If you don't and you just copy and then you take that to another script, you'll find it produces like, I don't know, all this other format of how that text would be inputted. And I'm not familiar enough with computer science to know what's exactly going on there. I just know what I like. So getting length is another thing, the length function, which people are used to. And I've changed all the names of these. If you want to see them as a Python node, that's fine. But I've given them all unique names. So when you're in here, you can see them up and running. And then there's an example of each one working. So nothing too hard as you fly through the book. It's really nice to have reference to these, but start to think that maybe the strings are not what you're going to be using so much in Grasshopper. You're going to be using Booleans, you're going to be using integers, and you're going to be using floats. So all of these can start to play with that ability to use those things. So you become familiar with index, changing items, combining lists, which is pretty basic, but you can use that data. That way you're not stuck in the sets tool and the sorting tools and everything that's happening here, because these are really nice, tight Python scripts that are written, or actually C# scripts, that are going to do everything you want and be compiled for you into these kind of vanilla or off-the-shelf nodes. But when you get in here and you realize what's going on a little deeper into Python, you can really start to customize those. So removing and popping, picking an element, you don't just have to pop the item at the end of the list. You pick any one by any index number. You're going to learn how to count better. You're going to learn how to count a certain amount of numbers that are in the text. So this one is, well, that's deleting a whole list, which I didn't even know about. So that was new to me. I didn't know you could delete a whole, I knew you could clear it, but I didn't know you could delete the whole thing. This one's one example of using that. And like I said, I have the F. I show the errors when they do occur, and then I also have them not occurring, except for Jupyter Notebooks. I edited it out because with Jupyter Notebooks, I'm finding if you hit an error, it's not going to keep running on the script, and I want that script to keep running through what I'm doing. Here's another one that had trouble with indexed list names, and that was the what was not working there for me. Error occurs if the literal is not in a list. So there's no problem really here with working it in IronPython or in Python 2. But if you stop it, then what are you going to do with it anyhow? So it just throws an error, and that's the whole point of that. That if you're looking for an item in a list that's not there, you're not going to find it. So you might have to set up some conditionals to get around that. I think there's some examples. The sorting is really nice because it's going to become even better when you get into dictionaries. And you're going to be able to pull some magic things out. There's some strings here, and there's some number series working into the negatives as well. And really making sense with reverse lists. And then how you would go about creating a list even for dates. Not that I'm going to use dates in Grasshopper. I don't think I'll ever be doing that. But I think there's a nice example here. And here's the case where if you're using Python 3, you input this. If you're just using Python 2, you probably just, for date and list, you probably just produce the date. The problem is you can't get in there and format it unless you relearn your formatting of 2.0 Python, which I'm not interested in doing. The reverse true cause in here is pretty nice to tuck that in. And even though this one I didn't write it out here, you can open up the script and see exactly where I put in the reverse true under sort here after making it. So the whole script's here, and like I said, with Python 2.0 and 3.0 are considered. So everything's up and running. You've got everything here. I'm not going to tuck them into user objects and off the shelf that I was doing last year. This file is really available for you that anything you think might come in handy, like if you want to start playing with number lists and doing some fancy footwork with reversing, you maybe want to skip the strings, just grab one of these. Just grab what's working, copy it, bring it down to your sandbox, and then just start playing with some geometries and driving it by that data. Keep in mind that you can't really use the data coming out of the out because you've got it all formatted this way. You may want to go in there and pull exactly things that are within your script. So if I was in there and I was trying to find list numbers, I could just take this to numbers and see how it's outputted in the end. If I go down to the bottom, printing numbers in the end, or printing date. Well, actually, I don't want to print date. Let's just do numbers. And let's see what happens when I run the script test. And now I'm going to produce those numbers, which now, sorted or not, they're available for me to pull back in, have Python control over things in one little node, and see that I've ordered those in reverse order. So a nice way to sort with Python and not try and figure it out through node scripting, which is always kind of new if you're not used to dictionaries and key values, which I wasn't a year ago, and I'm starting to figure it out. What's nice is pulling this into custom functions and custom classes is really going to be exciting. But I think the real trick is not to get in here and get bogged down in Rhino script syntax, because you do not have to customize a node to do a whole operation. Control your data in the simplest data lists, but go even simpler to numbers, to integers, to maybe floats, and trickle in some booleans and pull out some really powerful tools for getting control of your scripts. Because if you drive it from those numbers, you're going to be able to get into the Rhino remote, ghPython remote libraries and start doing things with the real excitement of data science, machine learning, artificial intelligence, and all that stuff that's awaiting your ability, your creativity scientifically. And if you're an artist or a designer of any sorts, then you want to get in there and start controlling things and seeing that. So you're taking your mathematical mind and you're trying to pair that with your perceptual mind. And if you have that ability, I think you got a great place in this world to be creative and design things. So Michael Wickerson at Wickerson Studios, playing around with ghPython. Like I said, I will go through the tuples and the sets, which is just a couple of pages before going into Chapter 4, Book 2, fully on dictionaries. And then the next book is amazing because you're going to hit functions, classes, and errors with those before modules. And then we're really going to get rolling. So 10-minute video. Thanks.